Hello, I want to show you how to make a tiered skirt using body measurements. This is for a 2.5-year-old, so it's small in size. I saw a cute little skirt and it was made with multiple colors of fabric, and you can find this easily in any store. Well, you can use scraps that you have at home to make a cute little tiered skirt. So what I did, I took body measurements of my great-grand, and her waist measured 20 inches, her hips 23, the finished length is 14 inches. So I took her hip measurement times 1.5, it came out to 34.4. You can round up to 34 inches. So the width of all my pieces is going to be 34.5 or 35 inches, round up. That's my skirt width. So now I want to put ruffles on each section. So then I'm going to take the skirt width and times that by 1.5. So I only want 1.5 times fullness. So that's going to be 51.75. Or you can do 2 times fullness. That would be 34.5 times 2. Or 3 times fullness, 34.5 times 3. This cute little girl skirt only want 1.5 times fullness. So all of my ruffle pieces, which are these sections, they need to be 52 inches. So I round up. So that's going to give me my ruffle width. My elastic, I'm going to cut exactly the width of the circumference of her waist. And we're going to overlap it 1 inch and stitch it together. I'll show you that later. But my elastic, the top part of my skirt, I want to cut the width of my elastic times 2 plus 1.25 inches because that's going to be my seam allowance there. So it's doubled. The elastic will be encased right in between these two, and we'll flip it over, stitch it, and then we're going to sew all these tiers. So now my tiers, the length of my skirt times how many tiers I want. I have 4 tiers. So once I sew one here, I'm going to lose 5/8 of an inch. Alright, we're making our tiered skirt, and in order to make sure that everything lines up correctly, you want to establish notches. So I'm going to take this and fold it in half, and see I did a little snip with my scissors there, and I'm going to take it and fold it again in half, and I'm going to snip again. And I did the exact same thing with my ruffle. I have all my notches lined up because I have pins in them already, so that I want to sew these 2 layers together, but I match up the notches so it's all quartered. So when I gather it together, I match up all the notches and then just sew my gathers in. So these I did already, as you can see. Now ideally you would sew all of these separate in the back, but in order for you to understand how to do it, I just left it all straight across. So here go all my tiers. I serged them for a nice professional finish. Now I used upholstery thread in my bobbin, so I can just do 1 roll of stitches instead of the double roll of stitches. Remember, do not back stitch. And I'm going to do this stitch all the way, just 1 roll of stitch from end to end, and then I'll pull it. So on a basting stitch, we want to do a large running basting stitch, and then we'll gather it up and then pin it in place. Alright, I finished my basting stitch. Now I'm going to match these in place again and pin them. That's my center. Here's one of my side notches. I want to match those all up together. So after I get those notches, then I only need to pull the thread at the bottom for my bobbin because it's heavier, so I can pull it, look at it, nice and easy, and then I can go ahead and sew my sections together. This to make sure that I keep everything balanced. I don't want, and of course you want to change the bobbin thread back to your regular thread, and I just want to make sure that I don't have a lot of gathers in one section, more or less in one section. It's a lot on this side, it's less on that side. So here I start out with my seam allowance, back stitch, and then I can take this and move my gather stitches around or you can do it before you begin to sew to make sure that you keep it nice and balanced throughout the entire section. Each section, take the time and balance out each section. It's a nice little gather stitch. Okay, I'm just joining the backs together. I'm matching all the pieces up together. Sew them at your seam allowance, and then serge them or use a zigzag stitch, whatever your preference is to finish it off. So normally, like I said, we would have stitched all these separately, but this I'm going to just use as my center back seam. And I flip it out, and we're going to be ready to do the waistband next. So there's our little skirt without our waistband. So we're going to serge that. We're going to add the elastic to it and the waist, and I show you. Alright, so for my top, for my elastic, I took the piece and folded it in half. You want to measure it. Remember, they all exactly the same size, the size of your hip. If you make the waistband the size of the waist, then it can't pull up over the hip. So all of these are exactly the same width. You want to measure the width of your elastic, and then measure the waist, take it and lap it over about 1 inch and stitch in a rectangle shape to lock it together. And then we took this and folded it in half. Now what I want to do is just encase it in between, and I'm going to use my zipper foot and stitch along the edge of it to lock it in place so my elastic cannot move. I don't want it to move around. And it's a slow process. Just take your time so you don't stitch on top of the elastic. And you're just going to have to stretch it as you go along so it's going to begin to snap in place and take shape. So here, I'm just going to sew right around the very edge of my elastic, a regular stitch length. I can see the indentation of my elastic, so I'm just going to take my time because I don't want to stitch over or onto the elastic. And then you see I notched it, I took it and folded it in half, I notched it, I quartered it, I notched it so it can match up the exact same place around the skirt. Okay, I matched all the notches together. This is my seam. I matched my center backs together. Remember the notches, matched all the notches all the way around. And now what I'm going to do is I'm going to stretch the elastic in between the seams. Still using my zipper foot, I'm going to attach the waistband to my skirt. So after you get the elastic in, just give it a little stretch and it's going to snap right into place. So I'm going to follow the same steps I used to make sure it stays locked in place. And then stitch that all the way around. There go my notch on top of my notch. And sew my skirt in. See, I stretch it from notch to notch.